See lots of familiar faces from session one. For those of you that were not here for session one, my purpose here really is to try to give to my colleagues information about what we're doing at Central. And the first session was about mindset around standards-based grading. This one in the afternoon I would call is a nuts and bolts look at behind the scenes stuff or what it looks like. So there's a ton of content to get to you. I feel really good because the bit.ly's there and everything is there. The link should be live. All the exemplars, or they're not even probably exemplars, but just the things that we use in terms of rubrics and assessments are all links that you should have access to. If there's any issues, please let me know. But I'm really excited to share with you the next step in this. Here's the bit.ly for this session. There's a survey link. This is my personal one. I would really appreciate it if you would just let me know what you think so I can improve. And then parking lot questions. This I used with the assistant principal conference and it really worked well. You can fill out that form and I can email you directly answers or contact you directly with questions. That maybe take a little longer or more personal. Difference between this session and the first session, besides obviously the content, is that I'm going to try to slow down and answer questions about specific things that we look at, this specific rubric or whatever. So feel free to throw those out there. I am going to be sensitive to time because I want to make sure we get all the way from the last thing we talk about is about AP courses in standards-based grading, what we do with the semester exams. We don't have semester exams anymore. I'm really excited to share that with you and so on. So, however, if you were not here, this is the bit.ly to session one. And the information there will be very helpful about mindset. It'll be particularly helpful if you feel like you know what standards-based grading is and what you want to do with it. It will help you address tough questions from tough customers, like the veteran teacher who has done it that way successfully for 30 years, doesn't want to hear any of your stories. That might help them there. So there's that bit.ly, and that's today's, and there's the rest of it. So again, there's a session one bit.ly again. This is my family, really proud of them. Obviously, Kennedy's graduated from Madison in nursing. Will's going to graduate from Morris this spring. Will be a pediatric physical therapist in 3 or 4 years. And Griffin is an excellent student at Stout. Griffin's the kind of kid who did not need to do homework in math. He got a 35 in the ACT. I do not know where that came from. He said, Dad, AP Calc is really easy. And I said, son, I wasn't even allowed to go on the AP wing. I couldn't even enter down that direction. So I don't know where he gets it from, but I mentioned the first group as well. Aside from him, his claim to fame being his mother, who's amazing, is he wrote a book and published it before he graduated his senior year. It's called Over Earth. If you want to look for that, it's for sale all over the place. But really proud of all the kids, obviously, and just like you, I'll stand here and talk about them for a while, but I will move on. So anyway, great kids, very lucky to have them. So as we go, and this isn't going to be all review, just a couple slides for those of you that it'll be a quick repeat. But as we frame our discussion this afternoon, same as this morning, ask yourself, does standards-based grading serve in the best interest of students, all students? And that's how we'll frame it. Outcomes for today, check on the first two, hopefully, and now we'll hit number 3, which is lots of examples and the nitty-gritty stuff, the stuff that really where you talk about the philosophy you read in the books, how we're going to do it in the books, and you have to say yes, they have it, or no, they don't. You can't do letter grades, whatever that is. Where that stuff runs into the reality of the world that we live in, that's what this afternoon is really about. Okay? So the goal is to have you leave here with lots of stuff. And there, if you go through the slides ahead of me, you'll see there's lots of opportunities. I would encourage you to lock in on what we're talking about presently, because that'll be important. So here's the nuts and bolts of this. We're going to talk about terminology, proficiency levels, teaching to the 4 most recent, and then we'll talk about the foundational things. We'll look at rubrics, assessments, and reassessments, final exams and semester grades, grade conversion and reporting, and advanced placement. If I could do it again, I would put this at the end because it's least important, grade conversion and reporting. It's important to students and staff and parents, and it should be, but it's really the least important thing on what we do. So proficiency levels for us, and we use the same terminology across the district. That's important. One is beginning and developing, proficient, and advanced. the error that we made a long time ago, not an error, but part of the growth a long time ago, this is year 6 for me. When we first started, we talked about guaranteed viable curriculum and what is proficiency. Proficiency is a B. Proficiency is 80%. It was the wrong conversation, but it was the right conversation for where we were on this road. And so now we've evolved into better understanding of what this all means. So where reality runs into philosophy, and the purists would say they either yes have the standard or no they don't. I actually posted this on a standards-based grading Facebook page, and none other than Ken O'Connor replied back and said that is not a 4-point scale, that is a 6-point scale. Because I said, well, here we use the 4-point scale. And then he said, no, that's actually a 7-point scale. So let me tell you about this. We did, and this is in the first session I talked about where you have to do you have to respond to the comfort level of your building and your community first. That's the first place you have to go. And so we started with our 1 to 4, and the teachers were really struggling with having to differentiate, well, you're either a 3 or you're a 4. And so we wrestled with that a little bit and came to, look, if it makes you more comfortable and the kids more comfortable and we can still express what it means, we're going to add a 2.5 and a 3.5. And so we did that. The first year, or excuse me, up until this year, we did not have a 0. We had just a 1. And if I thought ahead better, planned better, you could figure out that that's going to cause a problem. Because if I did nothing as a student and I'm going to get a 1, that does not accurately tell anyone what I know about that topic. It actually is a 0. Now, you'll see where, you should never use a 0. Agreed, in a traditional 0 to 100% or 100-point scale, a 0 is a killer. That's not what this is. This is a 0, which means no, we don't have any information. So I'll give you an example. We get to the end of the semester and we have very few kids failing. But there was a student that I need to have a conversation about with a science teacher. And the science teacher said, Kurt, this student is passing based on the numbers that we see, the 0 to 4 and what she scored on each standard. But there were zeros in there, and there were enough zeros. There were 8 standards assessed, and she had 4 zeros. We said that's a failing grade. She cannot move on. There hasn't been enough evidence for us to know. And so we had that conversation with her. You did not show us enough. We love you. Guess what? That isn't enough. So we have to work with her to get her there. So those kind of conversations have to happen. There's things that we have to adjust to as we evolve. One of them is we know that when they get somewhere below a 2, it gets mushy, to use one of my math teacher's words. I said, Logan, how far down on the 4, 3, 2, 1 before you can't tell me that kid understands math well enough to move along? He said, you get below the 2 and it gets pretty mushy. I'm like, okay, this was 3 years ago. So we're learning, right? We're learning. And so our next big step is going to be, you may see that we are technically an A through C letter grade school. Anything below that is not enough. It's not good enough. That we need to do more with that student. So that's probably more detail than you needed, but that is our proficiency scale. If there's questions, just shoot your hand up or just shout out, and I'd be happy to start. What we learned is that 80% B, when we first started talking about proficiency, was a problem because obviously the kids that need to get the 4s or the A's because they want to go achieve high things, we can't leave them behind. You can't say to a parent, well, 3 is really where we want them, because we have to convert it, as I mentioned this morning, to GPA, cumulative GPA. So they're going to have letter grades and cumulative GPA. So for kids to sit at a 3 and go, that's good enough, that wasn't going to work. So we quickly evolved to the mantra, we're going to teach to the 4. So on our assessments, there's always a level 4. And when we do like a single level rubric, which I'll show you in a little bit, we want those rubrics written that highest level to a 4, so students can see that. Not surprisingly, what happens is they raise their level. And even if they would have been a 2, they'll see that 4 and they'll shoot for it. Maybe they're not there yet, but they can push themselves further and get closer to that 4 than they would have otherwise. So we even talked about not even putting a descriptor for level 1, 2, or 3. just having a level 4. And we'll get more to that. That's the mentality that we want to reach for. So as we started this, we had to find a way to really explain what a 4, 3, 2, and 1 look like. So what I did is I took Bloom's taxonomy and I took just the words, right? Just these are the things we see always in Bloom's taxonomy. And these are kind of the I can statements that would go with them to help parents, students, and staff put a framework around what proficiency looks like. So now instead of this, which means really whatever you decide it might mean, might be different what you decide it means, now we have a framework to say, if we're not analyzing, evaluating, creating, and so on and so forth, that is not a level 4. So I can look at a science assessment and say, you have this listed as a level 4 question, but it says define. How is that a level 4? Now, they might have a define and then explain your answer or something else, but just in simple terms, you have these key words already made for us to help us guide us. And if they don't like that, we use Web's DOK as well. So we talk a lot about Web, we talk a lot about DOK. What's the DOK on that? Well, the DOK 1, I mean, like I told you the last time, I'm not brilliant, so it's got to be simple. Hey, look at that. It matches right up with what we do anyway. And so it gives us a great, like a lighthouse in what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, in case you didn't like one, we get 2 of them for you. So one of the other things that we talked about in terms of achievement levels, we looked hard at things like decaying average. They might have heard of decaying average. Okay, so we looked hard at decaying average. We looked hard at do we average, and we decided we settled in on most recent. And most recent is really important because it's practical. I think about if we're teaching somebody to ride a bike, and let's say that it's my son Will, and he's going to learn to ride a bike. And so every Sunday, I'm going to meet with Will, and we're going to practice riding the bike. And the first time we go, he can barely get on, but he is on. I'm holding him by the seat, I'm holding him by the handlebars, I'm taking him. That's not very proficient. That's not a high level. But the next week he gets a little bit better, and the next week he gets a little bit better. And the 4th time we do this, he's going through cones, not hitting anything, not falling down, nothing, and he lands safely in front of me again. Should we average all 4 attempts, or should we say to his parents, Will has demonstrated he can ride the bike at level 4. As a coach, I never ever heard myself say, you know what, you're a 50% basketball. It doesn't make any sense. What we do instead is say, hey, you really are good at this, this, and this. These are the things we have to hone in on, right? My wife would tell me, hey, as a husband, you're pretty good at this, but you got to work on these things. It's the same thing. And so when we talk about do we average, why do we take the most recent? We take the most recent because it makes the most sense, okay? And here's what I mean. I did the learning to ride a bike. So most recent with a touch of common sense. Well, Kurt, what happens when that student does, those first bike rides are formative, right? And let's say that it progresses just like Will did, and he gets the 4, you can see him grow, Kurt, beautiful. Well, what about the kid who goes 1, 1, 1, 4? Okay, what does that tell us? Well, I'm not sure he really understands. He just got lucky. Okay, then reassess it. Have him do it again. Why not? And then let's say we're in a social studies class and the student wasn't getting it, but then their essay was really good. You did it in class, it was a FRQ, you asked them, and you weren't convinced because they didn't show anything like this before. You thought maybe they cheated or whatever. So maybe what you do instead of going through this big process of rewriting that whole thing, why don't you sit down and have a conversation with the kid? Because you'll figure out really fast if they know what they're talking about. And so that kind of bleeds into, instead of making it difficult, let's make it easy. Sally did 1, 1, 1, 4. Not convinced? Hey, come into me during one time. We're going to have a conversation about the Civil War or whatever your topic is. So we use most recent score with common sense. What if a student goes 4, 4, 4, 1? 4, 4, 4, 1. We know they're a 4, 4, 4 all the way across, but they got a 1. You can choose if you want to give them a 4 or reassess them and see if they actually are a 4. But likely something happened with that kid. Maybe at home, maybe at school, maybe that day. I don't know. Well, that's where the human part comes in. We got to know our kids and talk to them. I would encourage that staff member to say, don't just give them the 4, but do something simple with them to build their confidence, let them demonstrate to you that they actually are at that highest proficiency level, put it in the book and move on. There's a hand in the back. Yeah.
I'm sorry, the DOP rubric you put up, is that the same rubric for our classes?
Yeah, so this is our framework rubric, I would call it. It's like our universal. So when they create rubrics, this is kind of their mindset, right? This helps create that framework for them. No, students don't see it from the teacher. They'll see it from me, or their teacher might talk about these words and so on. That, you know, when you're doing a 4, you're going to see. For example, had a meeting with one of our AP bio teachers this week, and he was talking about practicing the difference between these, what that means. What am I looking for when I ask you to analyze something? A common one is I'm asking you to compare and contrast. But do we ever really teach them what that actually means? Do we ever let them practice that in class? Doing those things. Typically in an AP class we do, but in the other classes I took, we didn't. And so I think that's a fair point. So this is a framework for us to build what we do. So most recent with a touch of common sense. Again, looking at what they did, what are they doing, what do they show us, and then have the conversation with them if you think there's something that's a little bit off. So Rick Wormley talks about a greatest, and this was from the first slide deck as well. The greatest is supposed to provide accurate, undiluted indicator of students' mastery of learning standards. That's it. There's nothing else to it. We don't put in behaviors. We don't put in anything else. It's how did they do on that standard. Those of you that weren't here first time, behavior matters. Their attributes matter, but we don't. We report them. We talk to them about them. We get feedback, but they don't impact the academic grade. So what I would call our foundation, and this is where your packet starts. There's 10 grading practices. So we're going to go through 10 grading practices. I'm going to lightly touch on 10 mind frames by Hattie, and then I'll talk about the standards-based classroom. So in terms of the 10 grading practices, I'm going to go through them one at a time. And what I did here was we have what we believe or what we will do as a teaching staff, and then kind of the why underneath it, like what it means so we can better understand it. So the first one is we will focus our work on student learning, not teaching and grading. What? We're talking about standards-based grading. I mean, come on, that doesn't make any sense. And I get it. Teaching matters. How we get to that assessment and how we get to giving them feedback and giving them a final grade does matter. But the belief behind this is that we have to focus on student learning. Are they learning? How do we know it? What do we do if they're not? What do they do if they already did? Force 4 questions. Okay. Number 2, determine a student's proficiency level using essential standards for the course. If it is not an essential standard, it does not go in the gradebook. Period. It does not impact the academic grade. So they have to do a lot of work on unpacking standards. I'm sure all of your staffs have done that. It's a constant reinvestigation, like, hey, what did you note this year? We get to the end of the year. What did you note this year on a standard that maybe you could not cover next year, or maybe doesn't fit in that you can talk to your colleagues about? But we want to make sure that students' proficiency is determined solely on those essential standards. Number 3, determine a student's proficiency level using summative assessment, not formative practice. This is a tough one for some staff members to get past, right? Yes, we give feedback at practice on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yes, I get after kids at practice on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yes, we adjust and we adjust to what we're teaching, how we're teaching it. We go back and review what they aren't getting and whatever. But that doesn't, I give them feedback, but it doesn't count in how we evaluate the performance on Friday. That stands alone. That is the best analogy that I can come up with, because we would never send our football team into practice on Monday not practicing what is coming up on Friday, right? We give them feedback, but it doesn't, and it will impact their performance Friday, but it doesn't, we don't say, well, you practiced poorly all week, but man, you hit it out of the park on Friday night, but you're still going to see. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? So that's the point of that. We want to look at summatives, not formative practice. If a student feels like they're going to get graded down and it's going to impact their summative, their final grade, that's where you get me as a sophomore sitting next to my girlfriend at our lockers, copying her homework because she was smarter than me and did or cared more than me for sure. That's what happens. This allows them to have practice without having the fear of being punished. Number 4, ensure the proficiency of essential standards through reteaching and reassessing. If a teacher, we have had interviews where if a teacher who wants to be part of our staff does not buy into reteaching and reassessing, we wish them luck and we hire somebody else, because that, you have to be there with us. Number 5, this is a hard one as well. Report life skills, behaviors, separately, not as part of the grade, academic grade, and I'll show you later on where we do that. But behaviors are important, but they are not part of the academic grade. We do not use extra credit, period. If that happens in the building, now I will resign, because it does not happen. Even on Pie Day, they don't bring apple pies for extra credit anymore. They bring pies, but they don't bring them for extra credit. Number 7, assess students individually when they're working in groups. This is a tough one. Anybody ever been in a group where you're either the lead dog or you're like sitting back letting somebody else do it? Yeah, me too. That doesn't work. It doesn't line up with standards based, because I want to know and tell and show the teacher what I know, and I want them to give me feedback on what I've done, not what in the group did. If Tommy shows up and he's not prepared, but I nail it, there should be some sort of way to separate those. That's an ongoing challenge. Is group work's important? Maybe. How do we assess those kids individually? Because they deserve it. I don't deserve to have my grade based on what somebody else does, in my opinion. Number 8, we do not assign academic consequences for late work. We will work to find the evidence of proficiency no matter when it happens. Okay, no matter when it happens is a problem in high school, right? Because we have semesters, we've got to move on at some point, and that's true. And that's where the reality crashes with the philosophy. Our middle school had talked about having open standards all year, so that the goal is to show it by the end of the year. More flexibility at the middle school, maybe. I don't know. We won't be able to do that at the high school, so that doesn't happen. But we do look for evidence when we can do that. It might be in the summer, but we're going to continue to look for that evidence, because they have to get that essential standard taken care of. Number 9, use professional judgment. I used a great example last one about what that means in conjunction with performance data and to determine students' overall proficiency level. So I'm going to use my professional judgment. These are individual children that have different things going on and so on. And they may have a rough day or a rough week. I have to factor those things in, not to adjust the grade, but how I respond to helping them demonstrate at their highest level. I'm not going to give you a gift, but I am going to consider your story in how I respond to that. That's an important one. We want to use that, and we also want to use the data. What have they done on formatives, so that you know what's happening with that student. Finally, number 10, we will provide students with opportunities to exceed proficiency. I almost took this off of here because that just says we're going to teach to the 4. And we're going to try to drive all kids to the 4. It doesn't matter their IEP status. It doesn't matter any of that. All it matters is here's the highest level of standard, and now we're going to work backwards design, just good, solid teaching to make sure you're ready for that. No different than when the football team starts getting ready on Monday to play the defending state champ on Friday. That's a level 4. You better be ready, and they got to know what they need to do to get there. It's the exact same thing. So in your packet, you'll see a continuum for implementing 10 grading practices, probably the second sheet. This is what it looks like. This might be the single most important tool we've created to check us on where we are. So all this simply is here's the grading practice, and you can tell I didn't put them all on here. I mean, they're all on here, but not on screen. And so now we wanted each, at the team level, we wanted them to honestly answer where they are with this. Really, really powerful conversations. They have to trust you as a leader that you're not going to use this as an evaluative tool. You're going to use it to evaluate where we are as a building on these things that we believe to differing levels, but we believe this is where we're going to be. These 10 things now at Central are non-negotiable. They're non-negotiable. My predecessor, Dr. Glenn Webb, started down this practice with grading practice and so on. I picked up the ball and continued it. Staff continued it. And we're far enough along where it's, if I come in the room and there's extra credit being given, that's going to be a big problem. And so, but we had to get the staff there. That doesn't mean you have to fully agree with what we're doing, because they'll come along, but that's the expectation. Just like you're going to have ICANNs. Every day you're going to talk about your ICANNs. It's not negotiable. again, we sit down with our interviewees and say, we go through these, every one of them, and talk about them. If I get the sense they don't have to agree with them right away, but if they're not gonna move our direction, I got a lot of other hassles in my life I don't need in the building. I don't need to bring somebody on and have a self-inflicted wound that you're not gonna adjust to this, then we can go somewhere else, right? So that's how important that is. But if you were to start down that road, we talked about the timing of the, where you're going with grade, this is a great tool to use. We just created it because it made sense for us. Great conversation starter. So we're going to talk a little bit about the 10 mind frames. This book, 10 mind frames for visible learning, was a book that we were going to do as an entire building, and then COVID hit and we shut down on March 13th of whatever year that was, 2019 or 2020, I don't remember. But anyway, so we never did get through it. We started to work through with our BLT on it, never did get through it. But there's important things here about impact. I have presented to our staff about that word, not going through the book. They don't have the book, but just going through what impact means. So when we do a coaching session, I'll say, okay, Dave, I saw your lesson. It was whatever, about whatever. What impact did you want to have on that classroom? What impact did you want to have with those students, and how do you know you reached that impact? That's how the conversation starts, and it's all about this Hattie stuff that we haven't even really gone through yet. But it's important because I think it's a tool that you can use, and that was my main purpose, was to try to give you things that you can use. Teachers need to see themselves as evaluators of their own impact. That's where our coaching session starts. And our coaching sessions are not confrontational. I probably learn more in those than they do for me, certainly. And it's really good stuff. But that's a great framework to go on. I would highly recommend this book if you're interested in that. And then here's some more of Hattie's for the end of that. Okay, so then when we're talking about what does a standards-based classroom look like, again, I have a reference up here for where that you can find that. I want to focus on number 5. We talked in our first session about when you're a teacher or you're a parent or you're a coach and you hear your students, children, athletes saying the buzzwords that you're saying and talking in the way that you're talking, it tells you something. So this language is important. We don't talk about points, we talk about growth. We talk about achievement level or proficiency level. We talk about, and this one came from, this was early on, like year 2 of this. One of our math teachers, Logan, I was questioning him about why they are reassessing on a standard multiple times for every kid, right? And we were early in our adoption of this. Math was a early adopter of it. And he said, because we want them to learn and retain it. And so we added that to the language that we use, learn and retain. Now we have weapons. If a kid says, I got it 4 the first time, why do I have to do it again? Well, remember, we want you to learn it and retain it. That's important. That's a life skill, right? It's built in, it's baked in. We don't have to report behaviors or put that in academic grade. We're developing it right here. So that's an area where we grew. We talk about the process of learning. We talk about own your own learning. One of the areas we need to get better is on goal setting with kids. They need to set some goals for themselves, and we just aren't there yet. We always talk about reteach and reassess, demonstrate knowledge and skills. This is a tough one, especially for some veterans. It's not about the task we're completing. It's about the standard that they are demonstrating knowledge and skills. All right, I'm going to pause there because otherwise I just keep rolling. Anything that we should talk about in that previous stuff? I won't be insulted if you say no. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about timelines? So, we are in semesters. How long do you give students to reassess? Does it happen before the next summative? How do you guys do those?
Yeah, we're going to get deep into reassessments, but there, at the end of, let's take a semester. At the end of the semester, we have a 2-week window where they can clean stuff up. But what it's evolved to is kids don't want that hassle. So they get their stuff done by the end of the semester. We also don't have semester exams. So the last 2 weeks is about getting their standards caught up. We have 4 people at a table, 4 different needs probably in terms of standards. So we work hard with them on getting up to speed on those standards to demonstrate them. There are no more long summative or semester exams. There's no more special schedule for semester exams. We just keep on rolling. So we'll get to more of that. And if I get there and I don't answer your question, please just poke me. Other things, yeah.
Let me get this one too, so, okay, when you set a standard for what the achievement looks like, is that an end of the year standard or this point in time standard?
Yeah, that's an end of the semester standard. So what we've evolved to is, yeah, I know you're disappointed that you got X, Y, or Z. You'll have another chance second semester to be able to demonstrate that you've grown in that, and that'll impact your grade positively. Not every class do they get back to those standards, but that's what we tell the kids is, yeah, I know you're disappointed in that because you didn't get that standard the way you wanted it, but it's about the learning, right? And so there's a lot of those really not touchy, but those, you have to be empathetic to what they're experiencing. So we do have timelines. Yeah.
Not looking for the most recent grade, but how do your teachers encourage students to try their best at all times? And they may know that the most recent is what they're actually.
Yeah, that's a great question. The reality is, of course, that we're all smart people, and if you're testing me on something that doesn't really matter that much, I'm going to focus on what does. I'm going to put out the fire first. So we have this challenge in math. When I show you the grade book, I hope I'll remember to show you how it works. But let's say they've got standards A through X. So they're on standard B, and on the assessment, they will assess standard B for the second time, and standard C will be assessed for the first time. And then the next time, standard C will be assessed for the second time, standard D will be assessed for the first time. So kids have complained to me that I don't even want that on there. I don't want to even try. The math teachers hold firm to this, and I'll support them, that they still get some feedback from that, so they want them to do it. There are kids that will do well on both of them. They'll try their best, but oftentimes I'm going to prioritize what's on fire, which is natural, right? That's what we would all do. So that's a little bit a little messy sometimes. Yeah.
We can touch on this too later, but the retake and reassessment, this specific. How is that going?
Really, math has been like a guiding light for us in a lot of this, and so that process I just mentioned about how they do their standards, they have a reassessment process in there as well, and so it really comes down to I really believe in people, and for better or worse, I think 99% of people want to do what's right all the time. They want to do what's right, and when we talk about if it's not working out, like if we're having trouble reassessing kids in an efficient way, that's not a people problem usually. That's not somebody digging their heels and going, I'm not doing this. It's a process problem, right? It's a systems problem. So what we would do with math, or a science teacher I met with 2 days ago, is to look at the process and figure that out. So there's a specific process, and I'll show you later. Each department can kind of determine what a student needs to do. Math, for example, they have to have all of their homework in before they can reassess. But reassess is not optional. If you score below a 2 in math, you are reassessing. It's just a matter of when, and so kids know that. They'll start doing their homework so they can avoid that extra hurdle afterwards, right? Speaking of homework, we have been working with our math department on how we improve. And one of the things that came up was a root cause thing that we did with them, and it was that kids are not completing their homework. I'm like, okay, and we started talking about it. And what it really came down to was not the homework, it was the independent practice. So we talked, then the conversation shifted from they're not doing their homework at home. Okay, so what? What do they do? Do you really want them to do their independent practice? So how do we build time to do that in front of you, in front of the expert? Because as soon as they leave our rooms, we don't really know who's doing that homework anyway. Hey, long story short, on the 17th, we're meeting again about changing to go to longer periods so that we can have some of that built-in time and so on. But anyway, so that's kind of I kind of got distracted, but it's kind of how homework ties into that as well. We'll get into the reassessment here in a little bit. All right. If at any time you ask a question and I go on a rant like that and I don't actually answer it, please just tell me. My wife starts most conversations with me, hey dummy, and then she tells me about that. All right, talk about rubrics. So the purpose of rubrics, again, this is from Brookhart. This is a book that I will show you later. That's really good if you want to look at rubrics. Purpose of a rubric is to assess performances. It gives structure to observations. I'll give you an example. I go to evaluate a teacher. Right now, we're focused on standard 3 instructional delivery. I go in with the look fors and the red flags for that as I'm observing. My observations are 100% better than they used to be because I have structure in my observation. It's not just like trying to look at every standard. I'm just focused on that one. Go, okay, I can handle this. That's really what it does. It gives us structure for our observations, and it tells the kids what they need to know. It describes performance in quality, not quantity. This is a tough one to get to. It's not, I have 5 facts about Russia. It's, I can explain why Russia's government is whatever that might be. It's the difference between saying, I can name state capitals and explaining in quality why state capitals matter, why state governments are important as a protection from federal oversight, that kind of stuff. It's that kind of mentality. And that's what rubric should help us do. It's used for feedback and teaching. Please give the students the rubric ahead of time and go through it with very specific information about what you're looking for and give it to them so that they know, their parents would know, and you know, and we're on the same page. Then we can use it for feedback. I'll show you a single level rubric where there's a description of what we're looking for, and we use that as feedback. They look at it and say, this is where I hit it, and this is where I missed it. It's a feedback tool. So what a rubric isn't is a checklist, a measure of quantity, as I just mentioned, or a rating scale. Now we'll talk about checklists. That's something that we do actually use, not in our rubrics, but as a nice little extra thing for the kid to help them drive their performance up. Okay, you've got access to all of these. I've started some that I want to go through. Let's start with a rubric guidelines. These are our rubric guidelines. We go over them with the staff. Like anyone, just like me, we have to go over it more than once. But the purpose of a rubric is to clearly convey information to students and parents. That and parents was a new piece for us when we started this. We didn't really think about the parents, but that's important. Also would highlight that it provides the teacher, student, and parents with common language. And we see that. That goes back to, if I'm coaching and they know what get in the gap means, and they're talking to each other about it, we're on our way, right? We're on our way. That's the same thing here. Rubrics should not include, or excuse me, should include the standard being assessed. It can be a hyperlink, it can be the I can. We're not talking about the real wordy stuff, but it needs to be something where they know, they look at the rubric and go, okay, this is what I'm being assessed on. Below the description of the standard are the I can statements. And then ratings of 4 to 1 across the time. I got in a wrestling match with my science department early on. Okay, I said we're going to go 4 to 1 across this way, and they wanted to go 1 to 4 this way. And so we had an argument, and I won simply because I said, look, we have to be on the same page. Your model, if you were up front, you could pick the model, but this is what we're going to do. But that's why that's in there, because it's important that, in my opinion, that a student walks into each classroom, there's consistency, not with exactly what's going on or what's in there, but that I know when I go to Mr. Johnson's room, I'm going to get a rubric that is going to have this information. When I go to Mr. Reiner's room, I'm going to have a rubric that's going to have the same format, same information kind of thing. That might be serving me more than the kids, but I haven't figured it out. And then, as I mentioned, it's a description of quality. What a rubric is not is what we mentioned here. However, other helpful content that they should or may include, not actually part of the rubric. Checklist for students to self-assess their progress. We have an English teacher who's a rock star, does this with one-on-one conferencing and paper, and when they're writing the papers, guess what? The product's better at the end. We had the majority of our freshman English class who has this teacher, because of her process, they're scoring 3s and 4s. We had no C's, we had no F's because of her process and her commitment to being clear. Anytime, and I'll show you another one that I just love every time I see it, anytime we can include an exemplar or a link to an exemplar, we want to have that happen. Okay, so that's the guidelines for our rubrics. I'm gonna skip from single level. Let's go to mice and men. So this is, we call this a rubric, but it's a lot more than that. This is an actual description of assignment. See the I can statements? See, they have some choice down here, what they need to do. There's a description, there's possible ideas for what they're gonna do. Here's a social media account, like a link that they can go look at. Here's a description of, in this project, I will be able to show my understanding of setting character and conflict by. Students are gonna tell that teacher, propose to that teacher, how they're gonna demonstrate their learning. That's pretty cool. Then you go down, you have the rubric, okay? Not that any of us would ever want to do this, but here's a link to the actual standard if you want to read that, but they have the I can underneath it. Now this was early on, so we've evolved even past like some of the content in there, but it's still a really good format for you to see. And then the checklist at the end. So before you turn it in, check your grammar, have a friend check your grammar, have your parent check your grammar, have Grammarly check your grammar, but check your grammar, and so on and so forth. So they have things, if they can check all these, they should be on a pretty good path to be able to turn in a level 4 assessment or assignment. Okay, so that's, we call that a, go ahead.
Something, just to add that some of our staff have done, because ELA, I would say, is a tough one to try to really assess a specific standard in an essay or something like that, right? So what our staff have done, which I thought was a genius idea, is that like that first standard that's being assessed, color code that students in yellow within your paper of where you're saying you're showing proficiency on that standard. Standard number 2, color code that purple.
Sure.
So then as a teacher, they love it because the process of trying to really assess the student's ability on all those, I don't have to try to find it necessarily within their essay because I can just look at the purple. Which also they really like too, because it confirms with them, does the student really understand what graphic structure is, that they even highlight graphic structure in the first place.
If I could unpack that a little bit. So are you saying that on their paper, standard 1 is in blue highlight?
Yeah,
So as they read their paper, they go, that's standard 1, they highlight it. Okay.
the student highlights it.
Well, the student highlights it.
The student
Wow,
highlights
okay.
it, which also helps the student
Yeah.
identify all the standards that are being assessed.
Yeah.
On
Wow,
the
that is good.
assessment, which I thought that was just a genius idea.
I think the ELA department deserves dilly bars or something.
Right, so just wanted to share that, because I feel like it's the ELA teachers frequently that are, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
How do your students respond?
Questions, how did your students respond?
I think the students really actually liked it, because what the teachers loved about it too, is they would get to that, and the student's like, well, I don't have any purple. Well, does that mean that you don't have any organization or any transitions or whatever the purple color is, right? And then it just also almost causes the students to revise their essay on their own, because they're noticing they can't even find what's being said.
That is really powerful, because then you could also do a peer review thing. And the question I would have is, if there's no purple, does that mean there's none there, or they don't know what they're looking for? It's like another thing. That's awesome. Love it. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so this is an art one. And so here you can see, all right, I'm sorry, here you can see the standard with the I can. There's a link to something that he wants them to have. It gives them a timeline, which is I think helpful, obviously. There's a group of directions, and then what I love about this one most, as I mentioned, is it's got great examples. So Mr. Reimer gives this to the students, he goes through it, and they talk about why it looks like their face moves in, like it curves in a little bit right here, why it causes that. I've been in there during his lesson, but he's doing that formatively, and it all ties back to this. So when we say rubric, we're talking generally, not just like this little part of it here, we're talking about the whole picture, right? And again, in a situation like this, if you can do, so that my message to the teachers, if you can just slowly build this over 3 and 4 years, you don't have to try to create it all at once. Try it, skip a unit and don't do it. What happens is, one, it helps them relax. You can just take it, you don't have to do this all tomorrow. Like my former boss used to say, don't chase a kid down the hallway, they're gonna come back for lunch tomorrow. All right, that makes sense. I was a lot better as a dean of students when I stopped chasing kids down the hallway, just wait for them to come back. Same kind of thing, you just take your time. You don't need to create it all right now. See what works, see what the kids like. But what happens is, when they start doing this, creating rubrics and giving it to the kids, there's less stress because the kids understand what they're supposed to do. They're not being tricked. Yes, it's still hard work, but the teacher realizes it makes their job easier too, so they want to create more. And that's what happens. It comes very quickly then after that. So anyway, and here it is again. There's the rubric. Okay, so let's go to, let's move to world language. So this is Senorita's rubric for one-on-one conversation. So this is what the summative looks like. You're going to meet Senorita in the hallway, and you're going to have a 1 or 2 minute conversation with her about whatever. And this one it might be family, I'm not sure. But anyway, so in there there's some older terminology in here, learning targets. There's some directions in there. Here's your rubric about responses and fluidity. And then here's some possible questions, right? Oops. Okay. So here's some possible questions that the kids have. They come in, they practice this. So now she has her formatives built in already. Because this is the formative, because they're going to be summatively assessed on that. When you come in and Senorita asks you whatever in the world that says, you need to be able to have that conversation with her. When I talked to Danny about that, I was really impressed and really pleased. And I just asked her, maybe the one thing they could add is if the other Spanish teacher and Danny modeled that, like what that looks like, put a video link of that on here so the kids can see what that looks like. I think that'd be otherwise, how do you give an exemplar for spoken word? You really can't. So again, and I'm doing this, and you can tell me to move on faster if you'd like, but I wanted to give you something in each of the areas. Social studies. This is a summative. It says units for summative test. Okay. Now, this is a third-year teacher, created this last year. This is her updated version. She's far enough along where she went from using kind of negative language, like don't have it, to more positive language. Okay, so she's evolved even further. But you can see the same stuff. There's the link, here's the I can, here's the 4-to-1. Look at the assessment. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Using the documents below, analyze how this World War I propaganda would have impacted American perception of World War I. Be sure to be clear and cite evidence as you go. I don't know about you, but I would have probably left the room as a high school student and found somewhere else to be. That is big time. I mean, that's a really good question. But I say, Carol, how do they perform? Really, really well. Why? Because we practice this. They practiced it just like you would with your team. But again, that's an assessment. And here's a rubric, and here's question 2. So she has created the rubric that applies directly to that question, and they've practiced it. And so she feels like they would be ready. I don't know about what your view is that out of the gate right away. I'm used to seeing it, but I'm always struck by how that is a high-performing question. I mean, that isn't a multiple choice. And I have a bias towards multiple choice, and I apologize if you're multiple choice. Well, but I don't. All right, and then there's AP Bio. I want to do a comparison here real quick. So Format A and Format B. Remember when I said how they did it before? This was the argument I got into. So just take a look at the difference. So here's the first, and I'm not ripping the teachers because this was like first year, we're just trying to figure this out. This is not a description of quality, it's an I can't thing. It's essentially a checklist, right? But some good things. There's the standard, there's the essential questions, and then you've got this rubric. But then there's this one. This one, you've got the essential questions on the side, you've got descriptions of quality. Just demonstrate, describe, explain, and so on. So there's a difference in the formatting of those rubrics. I would argue that this one is better. I hope it is because it's our newest version, but gives more detail, more meaningful information. Moving to, I want to show you the foods one because all the teachers will have different things. Well, I can't do it in this and that. Well, we have a standard on safety and sanitation because that was a big one. Well, that one applies across the board. Every time they're being assessed, we're going to assess safety and sanitation. That's a conversation that I had to have with that teacher in my office, and I had to learn from her. Courtney, tell me, how can we, if that's important to you and to what the kids are doing, Because obviously if you get somebody sick, or it's not gonna be good for you in your profession or whatever. She said that I can add it to every rubric. It was that simple. Okay, because I'd given her the impression, no, you only assess that once. Well, they assess it every time. And then I'll show you how we take each of those assessments, and we do have to average those for that specific standard. But it's the same thing. It's a description of what they need to do to be able to hit the 4 on these standards. So again, my point in going through this and going through it fairly in a long fashion is to show you that different areas do it differently, but ultimately the framework is the same. I want to show you a single level rubric. I have mentioned this a few times, and I think it's easy enough to just understand. But this is a single column rubric. We call it a single column, single level. We put in here the description of what a level 4 looks like for this standard. The student uses it to self-assess or partner assess where they're on track and where they're not quite. So my friend and I are in class together. We have a single level rubric. We both do whatever our piece of evidence is. I give it to her. She gives hers to me. I look at it. I look at that description. I go, okay, this is where I think you're on track. What just happened? They are talking about their learning. They're talking with each other. They're using the terminology. I can listen to them and go around. My job just got a whole lot easier as a teacher, right? Bless the ELA teachers. They've got so many papers to read and grading and so on. This helps that process. And when I say it's good for the students, but it's also what I've learned is it's really good for staff, this is an example of that. Then the student gives himself a rating. Students typically give themselves a much tougher rating than we would. But there's a ton of information there. Now, let's say that my partner and I did ours together, and now I sit down with the teacher during our one-on-one conference and say, this is what we see. And that just helps that conversation. So that's a single level rubric. I want to show you an actual one. Music. Okay. So what do we do with lessons? Well, this music teacher, in our music department, there's 2 of them, just presented to their conference music people about standards-based grading. Well, I'm going to tell you, some of my sleepless nights were about FIAD and music, and thank God I have 2 music teachers who are willing to open their minds and listen. So to evaluate a lesson, it's about the lesson and so on and so forth. But you can see here, the student uses musical terms and knowledge to completely answer each question. She gives them questions that were pertaining to the lesson, whatever they're trying to scale or whatever they're trying to learn. But lesson, maybe listen to a piece of music and how does that relate to whatever. And then they go through this together. That is a pretty powerful example of really honing in. I don't know about you, but I played trombone in high school. Mostly I hid in the library so I wouldn't get picked up for a lesson. But when I got close to my lesson, I couldn't get out of it fast enough, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't interested. I was in there because my dad said I should be a leader and get in the band. Okay, I did. Didn't want to be there. But when I talked to our music teacher about this, it really has made their lessons valuable. Kids want to be there and so on. I mean, it's not perfect, right? Because not always, kids don't always want to go to lessons or whatever it might be. But again, it's another way to do that. It took a lot of the pressure off of, if you don't show up for the concert, I have no way to evaluate you. So the concert's now become a celebration of, this is your reward. And we make a big deal out of it. There is some, what do they call it, musicianship that she'll evaluate. So if I'm singing for the people here, my teacher right there, and I'm looking around or I'm picking my nose or whatever, I'm gonna get assessed on that. That's gonna hurt my score for musicianship. But it really has taken the emphasis off of the actual concert itself. So that's been very helpful. Okay, and I'll let you look at those other ones in terms of just because of time. All right, let's move along. So providing feedback on behavior. This is a big one. So how do we provide feedback on behavior? We use frequency of the behavior. So our PBIS is respectful, like probably 99% of schools, respectful, responsible, probably 98% of schools, and successful. Well, we figured out that, well, if you're respectful and responsible, that's going to lead to success. We took that off our behavior thing, and now we're down to respectful and responsible. So what does respectful mean? We work through with our staff on this. That's what it means. Participates in class discussions or activities. And we're going to say, okay, every 2 weeks, I send a reminder on Friday morning, remember, do your behavior grades or behavior scores or behavior feedback today in Skyward. And we go by often, sometimes rarely. So what we do to be efficient is every kid starts with often. Now we're going to go and change the kids that are not often. They're sometimes or rarely. And it's just for that 2 week period. It's just a feedback piece. It's not to score, but it does give feedback. And I'll show you where they can see that in Skyward. Now, one of my goals is to try to get more parents to engage in going there. But that's a challenge. I mean, I'm a high school principal, and I don't look at my kids' grades on Skyward either. But I mean, it's a challenge. But that's how we do it. It's not point driven, it's by frequency. And that I picked up directly out of a book that I read. Might have been Townsend's book, I don't know. But then the same thing for responsible. And you'll see that in the grade book. Okay, again, that has no impact on our academic grade. All right, can we keep pressing on? Appreciate your attention. Yeah.
Quick question on Rubric. So this thing is stored in student voice and choice. Rubrics that share, they're kind of multidimensional, or trying to make very specific tasks and skills. Just looking at opportunities for students to have assessments or get kids involved in ways of demonstrating skills. Are you finding within the school that Rubrics are being applied? Those that are different ways of thinking.
Yeah, that's a great question. So where we find the like on that mice and men, that would be an example of choice, right? How they show it. We see more of that in the reassessment part than we do that the right out of the gate assessment. If that answers your question. Okay, if it doesn't, let me know. But yeah, yeah, we try. Yeah, so. This is something that goes back to when I was in Maryland. I had a special education teacher come up and say, so-and-so could not answer the question in U.S. history writing. She said, just on a whim, I asked him the question, recorded it, he talked for 15 minutes. So, yeah, we see that choice in kind of the reassessment side of things too. All right, moving into assessments. So this is also in your packet. It's nothing you don't already know, but this is a reminder, formatives is assessment for learning. That's why we don't hammer kids on the formatives. We use it for learning, and then summatives is assessment of learning. So here's an error that we got into. This is how it should look. Formative, summative, and then reteach, reassess. When I got distracted with how to, like the grade book and how to this and working with that, I forgot to continue to emphasize this. And I was sitting at a PD day with a science teacher who was having a really hard time with the volume of reassessments. So in this conversation, I realized in my brain, this is what it looks like. She's doing a formative and all the rest are summatives, and she just continues to reassess. That is a huge mistake that I allowed to happen. This is what it should look like. This is far less intrusive. It's far less scary, for lack of a better word, for students and staff, and it's far more manageable for the staff. I've even gone so far to say, if like math, they make them reassess on, at least twice. If they get to a place and they say, look, Kurt, I've got 150 kids coming through my room every day in science. If the kid gets a 4 on the summative, can I not reassess them later? Sure, if that's whatever. I'm willing to give those things because the process is so good. But what we're finding is that even if they do that, they're still going to get this content later as well. So they're going to circle back on it and spiral it. But that's where it gets mushy. That's where what you do in your building, there's not a one way to do it. It might work for you to say, formative, if they got a 3.5 or better, they do not have to reassess. Now they might want to, right? Some kids will. That's okay. If that makes the funnel smaller and it helps your teacher buy in and focus on reteaching the kids who really need it, go for it, right? It's still, the goal is accurate grading. So that's the visual that I use. Okay, here came a challenge. What do we do with a class like a Nat and Phys? All right, here's our answer. If the standard says you need to be able to explain what has to happen for the forearm to move like that? Okay, you can tell I'm a nat phys teacher, right? So we need to know the bones, check. We need to know the muscles, check. We need to know the insertion points. That means we have 15 minutes. And we need to know all those things and able to be able to do this. These are all formatives. They each have a summative. And we've gone around and around about, do you put that summative in there? And we've decided that if the teacher wants to, that's okay, I don't care. This is the big one. That's the one we're looking for. And so that's where my rub comes, is if we count these in the score, in the grade score, in the grade book, that kind of maybe lessens this a little bit in my mind. So you can see I'm still wrestling with that. My take on it would be the students, if you show them this and they know they're going to have to know all these 3 steps to do that, why do you need to grade it? Give them feedback on it, because they know if they don't get it, they're going to have a poor grade here. I don't think you need to do that. I think it's kind of a crutch yet, and that's okay. I mean, these are hardworking teachers. They're trying to come along too, and I think that someday it'll be where we don't need to do the summatives on that. But anyway, that's a good visual. We call it the step method. And it applies there. It apply to like Spanish 1. They got to learn these things to be able to make a sentence, all that stuff. We call that the step method. Okay, one of the big things that differences in assessment is leveled assessments. And I'm just going to show you this very quickly. This is like right out of the gate, what we talked about. Okay, so what you're seeing here is, up here is a description of what's, of the rubric. It's the rubric of their answers. But this would be where you would insert a level 4 question, a level 3 question, a level 2 question. And the reason we got to level assessments is because if you take a test, and I don't want to do the math in this one, but if you take an assessment and you put student A and student B next to each other, and they end up with the same score, let's say, on a traditional scoring, but this student didn't get any of the DOK 4s right, nailed everything else and whatever, ends up with the same grade of the kid who, for whatever reason, didn't do well on this, but got all the DOK 4s. How is that demonstrating that this, what they actually know? It isn't demonstrating what they actually know. So we thought the only way to do that is really to level it up. And so with that in mind, just hang with me on that one. I'm going to go to, here is a traditional math assessment from 2016, 17, or 2015. First thing you notice is it's 43 points. What the heck does that mean? What standards are these applying to? I don't know. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things to look at, okay? And I'm just going to speed through this, but you get that that's a traditional one. Here's what we currently use. Let's do pre-calc. So this is what our current assessment would look like. Now this is a high-end math, but it's the same in Algebra 1, it's the same in geometry. So here you'll know there's a level 2. Developing standard met 2. If the student takes this, shows the teacher, they will stamp that during the assessment. Got it, move on, go to 3. Okay, so then they go down to 3 and they do that one. Same thing. Oop, made a little mistake here. I'm going to circle this with a highlighter. I'm not going to say a word. Look at that some more, right? That's part of the assessment. Once they get it done, we'll stamp 3 and then 4. Now, the stamping doesn't always happen during the class period, right? I mean, I'm a slow test taker or whatever it might be, but that's the format. So what we see there is this is one of those times, and I mentioned the first time, efficient for the teacher doesn't mean effective for the student. This hits the sweet spot. It's efficient for the teacher and effective for the student. We require them in general they have to attempt 2 levels. In math, this one they don't have a level 1 in math. They really sometimes, especially in Algebra 1, they want a level 1 because they want to see the thought process and do they have those base skills. But you could argue that, or I could argue that a level 4 question should have all those other things baked into it, and we should be able to tell. But I'm not going to argue with them on that. They're the math experts, not me. They're the ones looking at it and have to be able to accurately say what that student knows or does not know. So what happens there is it frees up time to work with the kids in teaching. It's not a whole period of assessment and then a whole period of grading, and then we're going to go through it all. It happens a lot faster than what you would in a traditional. And I would argue that it's more meaningful to the kids. All right, what's the relation to functions? I think it might be the same thing, same type of thing. Yeah, so here you can see it's now there's a level 1 in there, level 2, level 3. But you notice there's level 2 only has one question, level 3 has one question, and so on. So that when I talk about level assessments, that's what we're saying. Now in ELA, their assessment's going to look different. Math is an easy one to show because it's just that's the way math plays. It just plays in step by step. Watch conservation of energy in our science. Okay, so this is now a science assessment that has been used as recently as last month. Okay. Now I would argue with them. I want to see the levels these are, and they say, well, they go from level 1 to level 4, and I just say for my own OCD, and because I like it to be consistent, and it tells the kid where they're at, we need to make sure that they know what a level 1, 2, 3, and 4 is. But you can see, I don't know science. I certainly don't know conservation of energy, and I certainly couldn't answer these questions. But I can tell you that I believe when my science teacher sits across from me and says, Kurt, this is a level assessment and here's why, and they can explain it to me, I can agree with it. You know, I can say, okay, that sounds good. And so what you do is when you have different levels, you want to see how far they can get. And the ideal thing would be, for example, we had one of the science teachers, he had an assessment this fall that he had one question that baked in everything. I said, Mitch, can you design a one question assessment that shows everything that you need? He said, yes, I can. And he did it. And I encouraged him, and he pulled back at the last second and added a couple because he was nervous. That's okay. But that's pretty cool. The trick is, if I'm going to give him one question, I better make darn sure that those kids know and have practiced what that's going to look like when they hit the field on Friday night. I mean, there's no other way to do it, right? And again, that goes back to the beginning. If I'm going to teach my child how to do something, it's going to happen in a certain way. I'm going to make darn sure that I've shown them and practiced for them the exact things they're going to need. All right, and then there's a couple things I'm not going to show you now, but you can look at. I would like you to go look at some point, if you'd like to, how the distance, displacement, velocity formative matches up with the actual assessment, because that's the other key piece is, yeah, your assessment, and when we design, it's backwards design. It's what's the standard, what's the question, the level 4 question you want to answer. It's I-CANs, and then it's what do the formatives look like, and what do the lessons look like leading to the formative and so on. It's not any different than just good teaching practice. But it's important that you are able to see those two. That's why I included them. And the science teacher, most teachers are very humble, right? Oh, Kurt, come on. It's not perfect. I'm like, I know it's not perfect, and none of us are. None of this is. But I wanted you to see it, and I wanted to reassure that teacher that you would see it. We're really tight on time, and I want to go through reassessments. I'm not going to go to that. I'm talking about validity. Okay, so I'd ask you to look at this, what we believe. This was really critical. This was last spring. We had to get over. We had a real problem with reassessments, and teachers were frustrated. So I had to figure out a way. So we talked about purpose and so on. So we developed a we believe. The BLT developed these statements. They went to their departments. They came back with red X's and Kurt, this sounds too negative and whatever. But these are things we believe. Number one, and I'm only going to say number one, you can read the rest. Adults should lead. This immediately calls out the people who we do have in our building and say, that's his fault. I'm working harder than he is. Yeah, that's because the adult leads, right? When I'm coaching a basketball team, I'm the one watching film till 2 in the morning. That's what we signed up for, right? And so we use those things. That is really important. It was really critical that they came up with all these statements. 2 ways to initiate a reassessment. Teacher initiated, we allow them to put expectations on a summative. If you're below a 2, you're automatically reassessing. Math, they'll say if you're below a 2.5, you're automatically reassessing, right? That they can do that. That's one. That's the teacher initiated one. The reassessment is going to happen. It's just a matter of who initiates it. Student initiated. I'm a really good student. I got back late from the game. I did not have time to study, or whatever, doesn't matter. I didn't do well. Please, can I do it again? The answer to that is yes. However, you have to have some skin in the game, right? You need to show me. Math, you have to do your homework before you can do your reassessment, but you will do your reassessment. All right, I want to show you Kylie. Her mom gave me permission to show this. This was impromptu, after school, waiting by the buses. This is my friend, Kylie. Kylie, tell me about your finance program.
So with within the state, to be managed, and then I got my UFC blood and then I changed it and talked to it to there was probably I changed it a minus.
And that's because you got to reassess?
Yeah.
So obviously Kylie has special needs. She was so excited to tell me. That was our third take, right? She just came up and before I knew what she was saying, she was telling me about Crowley and reassessment and my grade and hold it, all right. That's what it means. When I said this morning that our special education students have more self-efficacy now than they did 4 years ago, that's what I'm talking about. And it's so important and so valuable. The link in here is to our website. This is the website that I created so parents could understand. It's got a lot of information in here. I would encourage you to go look at reassessment guides by department. Okay, so let's just look at business real quick. So I told the staff that this is what we worked with when we did the reassessment, what we believe, and then I had them write their own purpose, and then they had to tell me what the design was going to be and what the process. And they did that for each department, and I told them, we're gonna go through this together. I have to approve it, and then it's going on the website. And the most powerful thing I could tell them is when it's on the website and a parent calls me to say, what's going on in math with the reassessment? If what you're doing does not match what's on the website, I can't help you. You've given me no oar in your boat. I have nothing. So it's kind of like, how many times is that really going to happen? But like kids, they're like, oh boy, okay, well, we'll make sure it's right. And that was really helpful, right? So now parents can go there and look. And I only show you that because if you go to our district website, it is, you're not going to get that, where is it? Anyway, you're not going to just jump in and find that. You've got to go to the high school one and so on. But I would encourage you to go through and just look at it, and it will help you show your staff what a reassessment model could look like. There's also some really good resources here that I would encourage you to look at as well. All right, this is what I was concerned about was the time on this. Final exams, I gave you a prelude to that. Kids are expected to have their work done, period. That's full stop. We do give a 2-week window at the end of that semester where they can clean stuff up. But the teacher has to use their professional judgment to make sure that we're not letting a student that limped along the whole semester, like get an A at the end. Okay, so this is what happened last year. Science teacher failed to communicate with me at all that this student was not engaging for a whole semester. And she was really frustrated at the end of the semester that, because we didn't have a 0 last year, that he would have gotten a C. And I said, well, no, he's not going to get a C, he's going to fail because he didn't participate at all. But the question is, did you call the parent? No. Did you tell me? No. Did you talk to the counselors? No. They have to do those things. Otherwise, I have no defense, right? We can't help you if you don't do that. So anyway, the point is that the kids are expected to get their coursework done. And I don't know how many of you have seen Larry Zeman speak, but from Chautauqua Warehouse, where they do standard-based grading, this is my Larry rule in my brain. He said, Kurt, at some point you got to drop the gate and say, I'm sorry, this is your score for this semester. This is how we teach you to work harder or whatever next semester. So this is our Larry rule. And so we have a whole thing on grading. And I'll let you go through that and look at it. But the idea is that they have that time at the end that they got to make sure to get it done, but it's not a guarantee. Early communication. Our early intervention academic alert form that feeds to a spreadsheet that I get alerted to, 2 weeks into the semester, that starts. And it's open, it's in every newsletter at the top that they have to put kids in. Who's giving them, who's causing grief, who are they concerned about, so we can respond in a timely fashion to keep kids out of the trick bag. We want kids to learn, not to penalize them at the end. Okay. Sorry, I'm going really fast, you guys. I want to look at grade conversion, which is really simple. But we got to go from achievement level to letter grade. So this is nothing different than the traditional grading scale. Nothing changed. We were 366 in 2014 when we were traditional. It's a 3.66 to 4 now when we're standards-based grading. Okay. So this is what it looks like. We got to figure out the achievement level. All right. So we take the standards in one class across the top. These are the most recent across the bottom. And we have to average. So the achievement level, when you add those up, I think it's 17. We divide by the number of standards, it's 5. Okay, that's easy enough. We come up with a 3.4. Okay, we go over here. Where's that? Oh, 3.4, they get an A minus. Okay, that's their score. Awesome. It's really not that complicated. Calculating to the cumulative GPA. So we got 3 classes here. You can see that their achievement levels are here. Corresponds to this grade. And this letter grade equals GPA points of 4, of 3.667, and of 3. That's nothing different. And then they get, wait a minute, I like boxes, sorry. Get carried away. Boxes. And then they end up with our cumulative GPA for this one is 3.56. That is nothing different. All we've done is change how we get there. That's it. Man, I'll tell you, when I was looking back at stuff that I had designed, like, I remember telling my friend and colleague, Steph, we got to come to my office. This is the answer. Well, 3 weeks later, it was not the answer. I thought it was. It was a good couple of weeks there. I felt really good. But then it's so simple to tie that 4 to the 4.0 scale. It just really, I'm surprised it took me that long to figure it out. Here's our standards-based grading gradebook snapshot. We were Skyward traditional, making that try to work. We went to another model last year, platform. It was a total mess. I took up most of my time troubleshooting. By the grace of God, we run into somebody that uses Skyward for theirs, and he connected to somebody at Skyward and how they could do the standards-based. So now we've got it going. All right. This is the teacher view. This is the overview of what they see. Then you get a little bit deeper, and you start to see that it's properties of water. I can differentiate between carbohydrates and lipids. It's the carb lipid assessment, and then it's got the grade over here, so it's a little bit deeper on the teacher view. And this isn't going to give you any great shapes, but our report card is blah. But anyway, that's the report card. But when a parent looks at it in Skyward as family access, this is what they see. And if they just click a little further, well, this is obviously math. They see that now, oh look, it's not just in math I'm doing whatever. Now it's got solving trig equations 3.5 and so on and so forth. Now they can see some more detail. So now I can say, hey bud, what's going on with this trig formulas thing? What's happening? You know, now I have something as a parent to ask them about rather than just, you got C, no basketball for you, whatever. You go a little deeper. Now this is still the family access. You go a little deeper. Here's our behavior scores right here. That's it. That's what the parent sees. So I'm pretty happy. Oftentimes my son is doing X, Y, and Z. If I click on this, it will show me, or hover over it, it'll show me exactly what that is about, what that's related to. I want you to notice, see the purple here. That's math reassessment. That's your second one. You'll see pink and pink. You'll see orange and orange, and darker orange and darker orange. And so you can see how those things are connected. And so now you give those parents some real information about what their students are doing. You feel free to leave if you'd like to, but I'm going to finish the slides if that's okay. Advanced placement. This is a bugaboo because it's different. You know, these kids are like future senators, basically senators that I know anyway. Depth of, we're looking for developing an AP thought process, not can you do the multiple choice, but a thought process that goes into that deeper thinking, the level 4 thinking. By the way, if I'm not incorrect, the AP test is a 1 to 5 or something like that. It's not 100%. So we've had that discussion with AP teachers. But our AP bio teacher uses AP units to develop standards and ICANN statements. Okay, check. That's good. He looks at 3 to 5 major topics from those ICANN statements. That's what it pairs out with, 3 to 5 major topics, still falling in line with what's on AP. On his review day, he has 3 to 5 major topics around the room. The students move freely around there. They work together, they talk about it and whatever, but they go over those topics. He also has a set of multiple choice questions, 6 to 12 of them, right? And for those of us that weren't allowed in AP classes and students, that's news to us. But there's a lot of multiple choice in AP, I guess. When he does the assessment and reassessment, the assessment's actually 3 to 4 FRQs. They don't have any multiple choice on his assessment. Even though the AP test does have multiple choice, and it's kind of a backbone of the whole thing. Anything 2 or less, it's a mandatory reassessment. Okay? Our AP scores have been very good. We've used the traditional model, and it's been very good. We're using this one, and they'll be very good. Okay? So it comes down to this. Benefits of standards-based grading in AP. This is from our AP bio teacher. Smaller, more frequent checks. He said instead of 8 in a year, I have 24 smaller checks. Okay? Or pinpointed checks. Pinpoint what standard needs attention in practice. It's about the process of it stays the same. It's consistent across their other classes. They're used to that, what's happening. Challenges would include mindset. Number one, mindset of the adult in the room. That's the number one challenge. Creating content efficiency, paring down and pairing up content. So you're still going to cover the same stuff, but can these two things go together instead of apart or throwing one out? Can we pair them up or pair them down? He said he's done that. So this is what it looks like. Chemistry of life. Here's his 1, 2, 3, 4 ICANs. Cell structure and function. Here's his 3, and so on. And that's what he's paired down. And he said, Kurt, it's not perfect. So you may have somebody in here who's an AP science guru. They might laugh at that, but this is Mitch's attempt, and I think he's doing a good job going down that road. So this is what review day looks like. So on review day, they have, these are their multiple choice questions, and this is just a little snapshot, but these are their 6 to 12 multiple choice questions. But the real work comes around the room with the 3 to 5 FRQ type questions where they talk to each other about what they're learning. But so that's how he does it on review day. Then on assessment day, it is not. This is FRQ all the way through. There's no multiple choice at all. And our reasoning for that, but wait, 50% of the AP exam is multiple choice. That was supposed to be about weight, like on the, there's more. We believe that students who can answer the FRQs at a level 4 will nail the multiple choice, and it won't even be a contest. We also believe that these kids will be ready for college. And that's what we believe. I'd like you to go back to the beginning, consider one question. For those of you that are here for morning and afternoon, you should be able to answer this very clearly in your mind, either no way or yes. There will be questions that you'll have regardless, but that's the question we started with, and that's a question that I think you should consider. These were the things we wanted to do today. Hopefully, even though I had to go fast, and I apologize, hopefully all those links and things will work for you. It'll give you something to work with your staff on. Here's a whole list of, in their live links, I would encourage you to get on. Those are the big hitters that will really touch. Like Brookhart will be, she's not on there, but that's one that you should consider getting on there. She's the one with the rubrics. O'Connor has his thing. Hattie has his effect size stuff. Everybody has a different thing. Also, this is a SBG playbook. This is, I call it a playbook. It's not actually, it's just a bunch of stuff that we do. A lot of this is in here, and I designed it for whoever, but the high school level. It tells you a lot of the stuff that we have here is in here. That link is in there as well. And as I update that, it'll obviously be updated as well. These are the main resources I would recommend. You can look at those as well. Everything you need is right there in terms of those resources. All right. Other than that, if you would be so kind as to go to my own personal survey link and fill that out for me. I know you probably last thing you want to do. It really does help. If you have parking lot questions, feed them into that form. I will get them and respond to you. If you want to email me directly, sbg@gmail.com is my personal SBG one. That way it filters out all the school stuff and all the personal stuff, and I just know what's coming to me then.